I want to work in a few questions here because we've been going a little under an hour.
Okay.
So, a couple ones here. One is, how did you choose the voice for Siri? It's one of the top ranked questions from the crowd.
So we were working with a partner, and there really weren't that many options, and we chose one that was better than the rest. It's really there's not a big story around that. It was simply a decision around.
Okay. How about why the name?
So Siri is actually a Norwegian name. If my first son was a girl, he would have been named Siri. But it means beautiful woman that leads you to victory. So we were discussing names for a long time. It was a tough process. And I just started sort of advocating for that one, and it worked out. A lot of people think it had something to do with SRI.
Right.
It had nothing to do with it.
Huh.
We added the I to the end of it, and we joked around with them saying it's SRI with intelligence added. The I. So,
how'd that go over?
Yeah, like a lead balloon.
One question is, what do you see as the next big trend in tech? If you had to be looking out over the horizon, what would you say to people? The thing if I were now you folks and I wanted to build my own textbooks, what would you be building it on?
So automation obviously is a huge thing. Artificial intelligence applied across a lot of different areas, but the thing that I'm really captivated with right now, which I think is going to be a huge deal way before people think, is self-driving cars. Self-driving cars, I think that's going to be a way bigger market than search ever was for Google. There's the amount of money spent in auto collisions and wrecks is like $260 billion a year. It's like 2 to 3% of the gross national product in the U.S. is car related.
Well, you see it, it's interesting. You see it in planes. There's an article today. It's been 4 years since we've had a death in a commercial airline in the U.S., and it's the longest period, I think, ever. And what they said was, and now it's like you could take a flight you have to fly 132,000 times to be at risk of being injured or killed. Something like if you flew every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, it's more than that. It's like if you got on a plane every day of your life, it would take 14,000 years before you got in a crash, and chances are you would survive that crash.
And the answer is because they say the technology behind simulators, the technology behind these crash warnings, collision warnings. There's all this technology that's been built in. You're right, it hasn't been built into cars.
But that's why, human error is clearly, texting, fiddling with your radio, being on the phone, drinking too much. Those are the things that cause accidents for the most part. And now you've got a system that is looking 360 degrees 5 times a second. That's figuring out that it has maps arranged. Dealing with weather, I think, is going to be the biggest issue. Different surfaces, I think it's going to take a while. But I think in 10 years, if you drive a car as a human, you're going to have your own lane off to the side. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding because, cars are going to come in and they're going to basically snap into a local area network where they can pull right up to a foot behind the car in front of them, which is they're all stopping and starting at the same. I don't know if you know the dynamics of traffic, but little perturbations in traffic are what cause traffic jams because somebody puts on the brakes here and suddenly they all have to put on the brakes, and how long it takes all that disappears.
I know this from my police life because what happens is somebody's giving someone a ticket.
I know. And they're going to have to look for new sources of revenue after this.
I know they will.
Yeah.
I worked mostly in gang narcotics, so I didn't give that many tickets out. But I'll say it's amazing to me when people, you're driving to the airport and you're like backed up for 10 minutes and you get there and everybody's just looking at this guy get a ticket. This poor guy's getting a ticket.
Right.
And you say, that's what we're slowed down for?
Yeah.
The Gapers Gap thing is incredible.
Yeah.
A couple other ones in here. The first one would be, as you look at advice for young entrepreneurs, what would be the seminal advice you would give a young entrepreneur today?
Well, I mentioned it already.
Aspiring entrepreneur.
I mentioned it once already, and that's learn how to tell your story. That is the number one thing. To me, that is the foundation for any new idea, is getting it down to a quick pitch so people understand it, and they get excited about it. If you can't do that, you're going to have a real hard time getting a company launched.
Should everyone learn to code?
No, definitely not. But we do need more coders, especially in Chicago, which there are, a few good engineering schools around here, but you really need more.
Well, you were really involved in what I think is really exciting, which is bringing the University of Illinois Champaign up here to the supercomputer center.
I'm super excited about that because despite the fact that we have incredible momentum in Chicago with startups, if you look at what kind of startups, and it's, all startups are great, but what you're missing is, the startup, the team that came up with a new nanomaterial, right? Or something that has a heavy research that's going to really, the next generation, I think Google's and companies that are, taking technology and driving that, those are going to be the ones that dominate. Now, there are great businesses to be had. Look at Grubhub. They're kicking ass on making something as simple as delivery, an option that works economically for all sides. There's a lot of businesses that are...
So when you look at Chicago and you think about prognosticate about the future, what do you see in terms of where we are now as an entrepreneurial community? And what's your sense of, not comparing it to the Valley, but comparing it to sort of how we move to the next level? What's your thought about where we are? What are the things we have to overcome to get there? And what's your view on the future?
So I'm very excited about the momentum. I mean, I came through here with Kevin a year ago, and it was a ghost town. Look at it now. I mean, the amount of momentum that entrepreneurialism has in Chicago is fabulous. I think the missing element is to get a Stanford equivalent here, which I think this U of I thing could become. I think there's some other excellent schools around. But I did notice that when I was talking to entrepreneurs coming back from Silicon Valley, a lot of them had ideas about things, and I would say, who's going to build it for you? And they would kind of look at each other, and there's definitely a dearth of really good, and there's just not enough because every aspect of almost all industries is going to be technology-based in the next 10, 20 years. So Chicago can't just be a startup community. It's got to take a leadership position in some technologies. I think there needs to be some research dollars put in. Personally, I would like to see Chicago make a few big bets. Look at nanomaterials or manufacturing.
At Northwestern, we have one of the top 5 nano centers in the world now.
Yeah, and I've been over there talking to those guys, and they got some really great stuff going on.
That's exciting.
But I think we need to do more.
Well, and you can see it. One of the things over there, I know some of the scientists really well, and one of them was won everything with the Nobel Prize.
Right.
He's young, he's our age, so he would win it older anyway.
But name one Northwestern company that's come out of there that's all the rage.
No, it's hard. It's early, but part of the issue, Jeff Ronan and I were talking about this as part of the Chicago Next effort we're involved with. And the trick for bio is, and nano is, the scale CEOs aren't here. And so you see these little pieces that have to fit together to make it work.
Right.
And sometimes the venture guys say, well, we'll move to where the CEO will be. And that's a tricky problem as well.
Well, look, there's a lot of momentum, and even Northwestern's got a lot of stuff going on. I'm excited about U of I, and I think IIT's here and others. But I think it is a smart bet to pick a few areas that Chicago can really become known for globally.
What would those be for you?
So manufacturing is really interesting. I would look at something like nano manufacturing. So if you've heard of a concept called lab on a chip, for example. Mm-hmm. Lab on a chip is basically a tiny piece of, it doesn't matter what it's made of actually, but it's like a tiny lab where you can take one drop of blood and do the work that 3 full medical labs would do in a period of several days. It would do all of that on the tiny chip. So it's essentially analyzing your blood across 100 different potential diseases, and it's testing all that, and you're getting a result in 10 minutes.
Wow.
Now, 60% of the people on Earth don't have access to a hospital anywhere near them. So you could revolutionize healthcare by being able to diagnose on the spot what issues are, and actually all you need is the Walgreens then, right? If it has something that's treatable. So there's incredible things that can be unleashed. The only problem with that idea is that we haven't figured out how to manufacture at that scale yet, right, with the exception of maybe the chip companies.
Well, you do molecular manufacturing, is another nano area that's really
Right.
interesting.
Yeah. So, take something that Chicago does well already and miniaturize it.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Great idea. So, are there any companies you're excited about here that you've seen as you look? I know you see companies all over the country. I'm sure want your advice. Companies here you're excited about?
Yeah,
You seem to be
definitely.
attired by a few, actually, from what I can tell.
Yeah, well, of course. My clothing needs have been fully met. So I got my Zip Fit Me jeans on, and I've got my Trunk Club shirt on. So yeah, when it comes to clothes, I'm set. On sort of I'm a science sort of technology guy. I think narrative science is doing some interesting things. They caught my attention when they started doing the the sports stories. If you guys know narrative science, basically you
Northwestern
plug in box scores and it will create a narrative. It'll essentially write a sports story itself,
Yeah,
which I found pretty interesting.
It is amazing. I mean, for journalists where there's a lot of pressure on costs, it's
Yeah.
amazing. And it's two Northwestern professors. I've known those guys for years. They've been working
Yeah.
on stuff. They kiss a lot of frogs along the way.
Sure.
It's a bit of the solution in search of a problem. But I think as the community evolved, they started focusing more and more on that. I think the growth of the community has helped them sort of turn that into a company. It's
Right.
really, I agree, it's really exciting.
Right. So those are some companies that I interact with now. But it's also important that Chicago gets some hits. So, what Braintree and Grubhub and these guys are doing now, it's really important, in addition to Groupon, to actually set a stage where it's not just a potential for success, but you've got a track record.
Right.
And believe me, the investment money, as you know, will flow in here as soon as this whole effort around getting people stimulated and going in entrepreneurialism, when that starts to show results in a big way, and of course it takes some years, there'll be a lot more money here. It'll become a lot cooler. This whole, there'll be 5,000 people in the room instead of 300-400. It just becomes more and more central, and I think
Definitely need a
that's
bigger room.
hugely, yes,
So,
hugely important.
So now, what's next for you? And if you ever did a company, would you do it here, or would you go back to the Valley?
So, whatever it is, it's going to be something that's really hard to do. I have some ideas of some things that I'm working on, but I would love to have it here. I do have some friends in the Valley that I'm in touch with, so there's some relationships there. But I would start a company in Chicago in a heartbeat. Absolutely. As long as I found, you need some really, really excellent world-class programmers or science, depending on whatever area you're going in. If you don't have that, you don't have a product, and the kind of things that I like to do. But if that was in place, I'm 100%. I would start a company here in a heartbeat.
Great. Thank you, Doug. It's a great evening. Thanks so much.